The story spread across the galaxy like fire. The Velthari Empire, undefeated for 400 years, had been brought to its knees by a species no one had ever heard of. 15,000 warships destroyed. Millions of warriors killed. The greatest military power in known space, broken by primitives from a small blue planet. Every species with ears listened. Every empire with ambitions took note. The humans had done the impossible. In the decades that followed, the galaxy changed. Species that had planned to expand toward human space quietly altered their borders. Invasion fleets were disbanded. War councils were dissolved. No one wanted to be the next Velthari. Trade delegations began arriving at Earth instead. Diplomats came with gifts and offers of friendship. Scientists came seeking knowledge. Merchants came seeking profit. The humans welcomed them all with smiles and open hands. But behind those smiles, the galaxy saw something else. They saw Steel Captain Ben Taylor retired from the military 5 years after the war. He had won medals, received honors, been celebrated as a hero. But he did not feel like a hero. He felt tired. He bought a small farm in Montana, in the mountains where the air was clean and the nights were dark enough to see the stars. He grew vegetables. He raised chickens. He tried to forget the things he had done. But sometimes, late at night, he would look up at those stars and remember. He would remember the ships he had destroyed, the lives he had ended, the moment when the Velthari flagship exploded and High Commander Zethril died. He had done what was necessary. He knew that. But necessary things were not always easy to live with. Commander Lisa Dunn took a different path. She became an instructor at the Fleet Academy, teaching the next generation of officers how to fight. Her classes were always full. Everyone wanted to learn from the woman who had coordinated the destruction of the Grand Fleet. The key to victory, she would tell her students, is not strength. It is adaptability. The Velthari were stronger than us. They had more ships, more weapons, more warriors. But they fought the same way they had always fought. They could not change. She would pause and look at the young faces staring at her. Humans change. We adapt. We evolve. That is our greatest weapon. Never forget that. Ambassador Paul Grant continued his work. He traveled from world to world, speaking with leaders and diplomats, building relationships, and establishing treaties. He became known as the voice of humanity, the man who could turn enemies into friends. But he never forgot his real purpose. Every friendship he built was also an alliance. Every trade agreement was also a security pact. Paul was not just a diplomat. He was a strategist, playing a game that would take generations to complete. "We cannot fight the entire galaxy," he told General Rita Cole during one of their private meetings. "There are too many species, too many empires. If they all turned against us at once, we would be destroyed. Then, we make sure they never turn against us at once," Rita replied. "We make friends. We build trust. We become so valuable that attacking us becomes unthinkable. And if that fails," Rita smiled her cold smile, "then we make sure everyone remembers what happened to the Velthari." The Velthari themselves survived. The treaty was honored. The prisoners were returned. Trade began between the two species, hesitant at first, then growing stronger. Elder matriarch Silith lived for another 30 years. In her final interview, she was asked about the war. "We were arrogant," she said. Her voice was weak, but her mind was still clear. "We thought we were the greatest power in the galaxy. We thought no one could challenge us. The humans taught us humility. Do you hate them?" Silith thought for a long moment. "No, I respect them. They are perhaps the most dangerous species I have ever encountered. But they are also fair. They did not destroy us when they had the chance. They offered peace when they could have offered extinction. Why do you think they did that? Because they are not conquerors. Silas smiled slightly. They are survivors. There's a difference. Conquerors want power. Survivors want safety. The humans built their entire strategy around making themselves safe. Once we were no longer a threat, they had no reason to destroy us. General Rita Cole gave one final interview before her death at 93. She had outlived most of her colleagues, most of her friends, most of her enemies. She had seen humanity grow from a small species on one planet to a respected power in the galaxy. The reporter asked her how humanity had won. People always ask that, Rita said. She was sitting in a wheelchair, her body frail, but her eyes still sharp. They want to know our secret, our special weapon, our brilliant strategy. And what do you tell them? I tell them the truth. We won because we refused to lose. Rita looked out the window at the stars. The Valkyrie fought for glory, for honor, for conquest. We fought for our families, for our homes, for our children. When you fight for something that important, you don't stop. You don't give up. You do whatever it takes. Some would say humanity's tactics were brutal, ruthless. They were. Rita did not flinch from the accusation. War is brutal. War is ruthless. Anyone who tells you otherwise has never been in one. We did terrible things to survive. I don't apologize for that. I would do it all again. Any regrets? Rita was quiet for a long time. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that the Valkyrie forced our hand. I regret the lives lost on both sides. She paused. But I do not regret defending my species. I do not regret protecting my home. The reporter asked one final question. What do you want people to remember about the war? Rita smiled. It was not a cold smile this time. It was warm, almost gentle. I want them to remember that humanity tried for peace first. We sent diplomats. We asked for negotiation. The Valkyrie refused. They wanted conquest or nothing. She leaned forward in her wheelchair. I want them to remember that we didn't start this war, but we ended it. And I want them to remember why no one ever returned from fighting humans. Why is that? Because when you threaten our home, our families, our future, we become something else. Something ancient and primal. Something that will not stop, will not surrender, will not rest until the threat is eliminated. Rita Cole looked directly at the camera. We are not the strongest species in the galaxy. We are not the oldest or the wisest. But we are the most determined. And that makes us the most dangerous. She settled back in her chair. The galaxy understands that now. They leave us in peace because they know the price of war. They know that no matter how many ships they send, no matter how powerful their weapons, no matter how great their numbers, no one returns from fighting humans. She closed her eyes. No one ever will. The Galactic Confederation had kept peace for 3,000 years. They did this through talking, trading, and making deals. War was something they read about in old history books. Violence was primitive, uncivilized. The great species of the galaxy had moved beyond such things long ago. Then the humans arrived. Earth made first contact on a cold morning in December. A small exploration ship from the Valorian Collective detected radio signals coming from a tiny blue planet on the edge of the galaxy. The Valorians sent a greeting. The humans sent one back. Within 5 years, humanity had joined the Confederation as a junior member. The other species looked at humans with curiosity. They were strange creatures, short-lived, emotional. Their technology was crude compared to races that had traveled to stars for millions of years. But they learned fast, very fast, and they seemed eager to prove themselves worthy of their place among the stars. Ambassador Quixal of the Valorian Collective was one of the few who took humans seriously. He had studied their history. He had read about their wars, their struggles, their endless conflicts with each other. It troubled him in ways he could not explain. But he pushed those thoughts aside. Humans were part of the Confederation now. They would learn peace, just as everyone else had. Crixall arrived at Earth's orbital station on a bright Tuesday morning to finalize a trade agreement. The station was new, built with a mix of human and alien technology. It floated above Earth like a silver flower, beautiful and fragile. 400 people lived and worked there. Diplomats, scientists, engineers, families. The meeting went well. Crixall found the human negotiators pleasant and reasonable. They laughed at his jokes. They offered him strange drinks called coffee and tea. He was beginning to think that perhaps humans were not so different after all. Then the lights went out. The attack came fast and brutal. Armed fighters poured from a cargo ship that had docked just an hour before. They wore black armor and carried weapons that burned holes through steel. They called themselves the Teeth of Silence, a radical group that opposed human integration into the Confederation. They believed humans were dangerous. They believed humans would destroy the peace that had lasted for millennia. The irony of their violent methods escaped them completely. Within 20 minutes, the Teeth of Silence controlled the entire station. They rounded up everyone they could find and locked them in the main assembly hall. 400 hostages sat on cold metal floors, surrounded by armed guards who looked at them like insects. Crixall found himself sitting next to a human woman named Grace Porter. She was a junior diplomat, young and frightened. Her hands shook as she hugged her knees to her chest. "They will negotiate," Crixall told her, trying to offer comfort. "The Confederation always negotiates. This will end peacefully." Grace looked at him with eyes that held something he did not understand. "You don't know humans very well, do you?" Before he could ask what she meant, the leader of the Teeth of Silence stepped forward. His name was Shulvex, a Craxian warlord with scales like dried blood and eyes like yellow fire. He stood 7 feet tall and carried a blade that had killed dozens of enemies. "Listen well," Shulvex announced to the hostages. "We have sent our demands to the Confederation. The humans must leave. They must return to their little planet and never venture into the stars again. Until this happens, you are our guests." He smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Some of you will not survive your stay." The Confederation responded exactly as Crixall predicted. They sent mediators. They offered concessions. They promised to consider the demands carefully. Their military forces held position at a safe distance, unwilling to risk the hostages' lives with direct action. The Teeth of Silence grew impatient. On the 3rd day, Shulvex executed 12 hostages on a live broadcast that reached every corner of the galaxy. He killed them slowly, one by one, while cameras captured every moment. He wanted the galaxy to see. He wanted them to understand that he was serious. The Confederation watched in horror. They had no answer for this kind of brutality. Their military had not conducted assault operations in over 800 years. They had forgotten how to fight. They had forgotten what violence truly looked like. But the humans had not forgotten. On Earth, in a building that appeared on no official maps, Colonel Danny Vance received a message on his secure terminal. He read it twice, then smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Danny Vance was 43 years old. He had served in the military for 22 of those years. His hair was gray at the temples, and his face carried scars from operations that would never appear in any history book. He led a unit called the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment. Officially, they did not exist. Unofficially, they were the most dangerous humans alive. He gathered his team in a briefing room with no windows. 12 soldiers sat before him, men and women who had been forged in fire and blood. They had trained for years to do impossible things. They had fought in jungles, deserts, mountains, and cities. They had never failed a mission. 400 hostages, Vance told them. 200 hostile fighters. The Confederation is handling negotiations. He paused, letting that sink in. We're handling extraction. Sergeant First Class Nora Briggs leaned forward. She was 31, with short brown hair and eyes that missed nothing. She had earned her place on the team by crawling through mud and snow and enemy fire. She had proven herself a dozen times over. Rules of engagement? She asked. Recover all hostages alive. Eliminate all threats. Try to take the leader breathing, if possible. Command wants him to stand trial. Master Sergeant Pete Garza nodded slowly. He was the oldest member of the team. 45 years of experience packed into a body that still moved like a predator. Timeline? We leave in 2 hours. The Confederation has agreed to give us 48 hours to attempt an alternative solution. Vance smiled again, that same cold smile. They think we're gonna talk. The team began to prepare. They checked weapons, studied schematics, reviewed hostage positions. They moved with quiet efficiency, speaking little. They had done this before. They would do it again. In the assembly hall of the orbital station. Grace Porter sat beside Ambassador Crixall and watched another sunset through the viewport. She was still afraid, but something had changed in her eyes. Something that looked almost like hope. Help is coming, she whispered. Crixall looked at her sadly. The Confederation is doing everything they can. But these things take time. Grace shook her head slowly. Not that kind of help. She did not explain further. She did not need to. Somewhere in the darkness of space, a shuttle that did not officially exist began its silent approach. Inside, 12 humans prepared for war. The teeth of silence had no idea what was coming. The orbital station floated in the cold emptiness of space like a wounded bird. Around it, the teeth of silence had placed sensor nets and automated defense platforms. They had mined the approach routes. They had positioned fighters at every docking port. 200 armed soldiers patrolled the corridors inside, watching for any sign of rescue. Schulvex stood in the command center, his yellow eyes fixed on the screens before him. He could see the Confederation fleet holding position far away, too afraid to approach. He could see the human diplomatic shuttle drifting at what they called a safe distance. He could see everything. Or so he thought. The shuttle had arrived 6 hours ago, carrying what the humans called a negotiation team. It simply floated there, doing nothing. The Confederation observers were confused. They kept asking the humans what their plan was. The humans kept saying they needed more time. Schulvex found this amusing. Time would not save the hostages. Nothing would save them except giving him what he wanted. What he did not see was the small object that had detached from the shuttle's underside 4 hours ago. It was painted black and shaped to avoid sensor detection. It moved slowly, carefully, using tiny bursts of compressed air to guide itself toward the station's maintenance section. Inside this object were 6 humans. Sergeant First Class Nora Briggs led the infiltration team. She had trained for this her entire adult life. She had crawled through sewers in cities whose names she could not pronounce. She had climbed mountains in weather that would kill most people in minutes. She had learned to move through spaces so tight that breathing became an exercise in control. The maintenance shaft they entered was 18 inches wide. Most galactic species could not fit inside. Their bodies were too large, too rigid, too dependent on comfortable spaces. Humans were different. Humans could squeeze through cracks that seemed impossible. Humans could adapt. Briggs moved first, pulling herself forward with her fingertips. Behind her came Corporal Kenny Walsh, a skinny kid from Ohio who could shoot a coin from 200 meters. Then Private Maria Santos, their demolitions expert. then Specialist Andy Cho, the team's medic, then Private First Class Cody Watts, the youngest of them all at 23, then Sergeant Vince Romano, who handled communications. They moved in complete darkness. Their eyes were covered with special goggles that turned heat signatures into shapes and shadows. They breathed through filters that made no sound. They communicated through hand signals and tiny vibrations, pressed against each other's boots. The shaft twisted and turned through the station's guts. They passed pipes carrying water, cables carrying power, ducts carrying air. They passed so close to patrolling guards that they could hear alien voices through the thin metal walls. They never made a sound. Meanwhile, the second element waited in a different kind of darkness. Master Sergeant Pete Garza had led his team into the station through the waste processing unit. It was disgusting work. They had spent 3 hours floating through garbage, and worse, before finding the access hatch they needed. Now they crouched in a storage room, waiting for the signal. Staff Sergeant Lucia Vega checked her weapon for the 100th time. She was 34, born in Texas, raised on stories of warriors and heroes. She had joined the Army at 18 because she wanted to protect people. She had joined Special Forces because she wanted to protect people better than anyone else. Specialist Charlie Green sat beside her. His massive frame somehow folded into a space meant for someone half his size. He was the team's heavy weapons operator, capable of carrying equipment that would break smaller soldiers. Right now, he carried enough firepower to fight a small war. Colonel Danny Vance watched everything from the shuttle. His retinal display showed him the position of every team member, every guard, every hostage. He had studied this station for hours. He knew its secrets better than the people who built it. Bravo team in position, Garza reported through the encrypted channel. Alpha team approaching primary hold, Briggs responded. 2 minutes. Vance nodded to himself. The timing had to be perfect. Too early, and the guards would have time to organize. Too late, and hostages would die. In the command center, Schulvex was getting bored. The negotiations were going nowhere. The Confederation kept asking for more time, more talks, more consideration. He had killed 12 hostages, and still they would not act. Perhaps he needed to kill more. He turned to one of his lieutenants. "Bring me the human diplomat, the young female. Let the galaxy see what happens when they waste my time." The lieutenant nodded and left to retrieve Grace Porter in the assembly hall. Grace sat beside Ambassador Crixall, trying not to show her fear. She had counted the guards. She had noted their positions, their patrol patterns, their weapons. She did not know why she had done this. Some instinct, perhaps. Some deep human urge to gather information, even when hope seemed lost. The door opened. A teeth of silent soldier pointed at her. "You. Come." Crixall grabbed her arm. "No, take me instead. I am more valuable." The soldier laughed and shoved him aside. Grace stood slowly, her heart pounding. This was it. She was going to die on a live broadcast. Her last moments watched by billions of beings who would do nothing to save her. She took one step toward the door. Every light on the station went dark. For 3 seconds, there was only silence and blackness. Then the screaming started. Nora Briggs came out of the ventilation shaft like water from a broken dam. Her weapon whispered death in the darkness, each shot precise and controlled. The guards at the assembly hall door died before they knew anyone was behind them. "Alpha team, primary hold secured," she reported. "Beginning hostage extraction." In the storage room, Pete Garza heard the words and smiled. "Bravo team, weapons free." They moved like smoke through the corridors. The teeth of silence had never faced anything like this. Their enemies came from shadows, struck without warning, and vanished before anyone could respond. Guards fell in 2s and 3s, killed by weapons they never saw. Schulveck screamed into his communicator, demanding reports. Nobody answered. His command center's screen showed nothing but static. His defense grid had been disabled by a virus nobody detected. His sensor nets had been blinded by a hack so elegant it would take his technicians years to understand. The Craxian warlord stood in the darkness, his blade in his hand, and felt something he had not felt in decades. Fear. In the assembly hall. Grace Porter watched as humans in black armor appeared from nowhere. They moved like ghosts, their weapons cutting down guards with impossible speed. One of them stopped beside her and spoke in a voice that was calm and steady. "Ma'am, I'm Sergeant Briggs. We're here to take you home. Stay low, move quiet, follow the green light." Grace looked at the small chemical light attached to Briggs's back. It glowed soft green in the darkness, a tiny star in an ocean of black. "How many of you are there?" she whispered. Briggs was already moving toward the next group of hostages. Her answer floated back through the darkness, matter-of-fact and utterly confident. 12. Grace looked at Ambassador Crixall. His eyes were wide with shock. He had seen many things in his long life. He had never seen anything like this. The galaxy was about to learn what 12 humans could do. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Every major news network carried the story. Every planet with communication systems received the footage. Every species with eyes watched in disbelief as the details emerged. 400 hostages, 200 terrorists, 12 humans. 40-7 minutes. 0 civilian casualties. Ambassador Crixall stood before the Confederation Council and gave his report. The Great Hall was silent as he spoke. Normally, council sessions were filled with whispered conversations and quiet negotiations. Today, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. "I have served the Confederation for 200 years, Crixall began. "I have witnessed conflicts on 100 worlds. I have studied warfare as both an academic pursuit and a practical necessity. In all that time, I believed I understood what combat meant." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I was wrong." The council members leaned forward, their various eyes and sensory organs fixed on the Valorian ambassador. "The humans did not fight like any species I have encountered," Crixall continued. "They did not rely on superior numbers. They did not rely on superior technology. They relied on something else. Something I still do not fully understand." He closed his triple lids briefly, remembering. They moved through that station like shadows with purpose. They killed without hesitation and showed mercy without weakness. They appeared from nowhere, struck without warning, and vanished before anyone could respond. The Teeth of Silence had 200 trained fighters. The humans sent 12 specialists. A Craxian council member raised a clawed hand. "Ambassador, the Craxian warrior tradition spans 8,000 years. We have produced the finest fighters in the known galaxy. Are you suggesting that 12 humans could defeat 200 of our warriors?" Crixall looked at him steadily. "I am not suggesting it, council member. I am not some member. I witnessed it." The room erupted in murmurs and protests. The Craxians were offended. The Zolvani were skeptical. The Dendari were calculating military equations in their hive minds and finding that none of them made sense. "There must be an explanation," someone demanded. "Hidden reinforcements. Secret weapons, something." "I watched them move with my own eyes," Crixall said firmly. "I can see wavelengths of light that your species cannot imagine. I can detect heartbeats from across a room. I never saw them coming. None of us did. Not until they wanted us to." The council fell silent again. Crixall continued. "After the rescue, I had the opportunity to speak with their sergeant, a female human named Briggs. I asked her how they had accomplished this impossible feat. She told me it was simply training. He shook his great head slowly. It was not simply training. It was something more. Something deeper. The humans have spent their entire existence at war with themselves. They have fought on every terrain their planet offers. They have developed weapons and tactics that we never imagined because we never needed to imagine them. We stopped fighting 1,000 years ago. We chose peace and prosperity over conflict. We forgot what violence truly looked like. The humans never forgot. In the days that followed, intelligence agencies across the galaxy began investigating. They accessed human databases. They studied human history. They watched human entertainment media, which seemed strangely obsessed with war and conflict, that what they found disturbed them deeply. They learned about organizations called Navy SEALs and Army Rangers and Green Berets. They learned about selection processes so brutal that most candidates failed. They learned about training exercises that killed soldiers before they ever saw real combat. They learned about humans who could survive in frozen mountains, burning deserts, endless oceans, and suffocating jungles. They learned about a species that had never known true peace. Not for a single generation in their entire existence. General Korath of the Craxian Defense Force read the intelligence reports and felt something cold settle in his stomach. The Craxians were warriors. They prided themselves on their combat prowess. They had conquered 3 star systems before the Confederation convinced them to pursue more peaceful expansion, but they had conquered those systems with overwhelming force. Massive armies, giant warships, numerical superiority. The humans did not need numerical superiority. 12 against 200. Korath closed the report and stared at the wall for a long time. On Earth, the soldiers who had conducted the rescue returned to their base with no fanfare. There were no parades, no medal ceremonies. Their operation was classified at the highest levels. Officially, they had never left Earth. Colonel Danny Vance gathered his team in their common room. They drank beer and talked quietly about the mission. They discussed what had worked and what needed improvement. They were already thinking about the next operation. "Good work," Vance told them. Everyone performed exactly as trained. 0 mistakes. Sergeant Briggs shrugged. Watts took 2 hits. Private First Class Cody Watts held up his bandaged arm. "They were just scratches." "Barely counts." "In my report, it counts," Briggs replied dryly. "Next time, don't stand in front of bullets." The team laughed. It was the kind of laughter that only people who had faced death together could share. Meanwhile, the Confederation Council held emergency sessions to discuss the implications of what they had witnessed. Some members were frightened. Some were impressed. Some were already thinking about how to use humanity's unique capabilities for their own purposes. The decision was unanimous. Humanity would be promoted to full Confederation membership immediately. They would have a seat on the council. They would have a voice in galactic affairs. More importantly, they would have protection from anyone who might want to exploit their dangerous talents. Several council members privately began improving their own defensive capabilities. Just in case. Grace Porter, the young diplomat who had nearly died on that station, returned to Earth as something of a hero. She gave interviews. She wrote articles. She told everyone who would listen about the soldiers who had saved her life. They were calm, she told one reporter. Completely calm. Like they had done this 1,000 times before. Like it was just another day at work. "Were you scared?" The reporter asked. Grace thought about it. "I was terrified. Right up until the moment the lights went out. Then I just felt sorry for the terrorists." Sorry? They had no idea what was coming. None of us did. She smiled slightly. But I knew, somewhere deep down, that help was coming. Real help. The kind of help that doesn't negotiate. Across the galaxy, that phrase began to spread. The kind of help that doesn't negotiate. It became a warning, a promise, and a prayer all at once. Shulvex, the Crassian warlord, was transported to a Confederation prison facility to await trial. He would spend the rest of his life there. But before he went, he gave one final interview to a galactic news network. "I fought in 7 wars," he said, his yellow eyes haunted and hollow. "I killed more beings than I can count. I was never afraid." He stared at the camera. "I'm afraid now." The reporter asked him what had changed. Shulvex was quiet for a long moment. "They came out of the darkness," he finally said. "They came out of the darkness and they killed my soldiers like they were insects. I never saw their faces. I never heard their footsteps. They were everywhere and nowhere." He shuddered. "The humans call them special forces. The galaxy should pray never to meet them." The interview ended. The camera cut away. But his words lingered in the minds of everyone who heard them. Special forces. The galaxy had learned a new phrase, and the galaxy would never forget it. 5 years passed, and the galaxy changed. It did not change in obvious ways. The Confederation still met. Trade still flowed between the stars. Diplomacy still resolved most disputes before they became conflicts. On the surface, everything looked the same as it had for 3,000 years. But underneath, everything was different. Master Sergeant Nora Briggs stood on a training field on the planet Valoria, watching her latest class of alien recruits struggle through an obstacle course. They were the best their species had to offer. The strongest Craxians, the smartest Valorians, the most dedicated soldiers from a dozen different worlds. Most of them had already failed. "Faster," Briggs shouted. "My grandmother could crawl faster than that, and she's been dead for 15 years. A young Craxian male named Thran collapsed in the mud, his chest heaving. He had scaled mountains on his homeworld. He had fought in 3 border conflicts. He had believed himself to be a warrior without equal. He had been wrong. Why? He gasped at Briggs. "Why is it so hard?" Briggs crouched beside him. She was 40 years old now, but she still moved like someone half her age. The gray in her hair only made her look more dangerous. "Because combat is not about strength," she told him. "It's not about speed or weapons or technology. It's about will. The will to keep moving when your body wants to stop. The will to keep fighting when everything tells you to give up." She stood and looked out at the training field. "Humans have that will. We've been breeding it into ourselves for 10,000 years. Every war we fought, every disaster we survived, every enemy we defeated. It all made us a little bit harder, a little bit meaner, a little bit more stubborn." Thran forced himself back to his feet. His muscles screamed. His lungs burned. But something in Briggs's words had reached him. "And you think you can teach us this will?" Briggs smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "I can try. Most of you will fail. But the ones who pass?" She nodded slowly. "You'll be something special. Something the galaxy has never seen before." Thran ran. He did not make it through the course that day. But he came back the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. 6 months later, he graduated. General Danny Vance sat in a Confederation strategic planning session, listening to allied commanders discuss a growing threat. The Vraxian Dominion, a hostile empire on the galaxy's edge, was expanding rapidly. They had conquered 4 systems in the past 2 years. Their military was massive. Their technology was advanced. Their leaders were ruthless. Traditional projections suggested a decade-long war with massive casualties on both sides. Vance listened quietly, letting the others talk. He was 53 now, his hair almost entirely gray, his face weathered by decades of impossible operations. He had been promoted to general 3 years ago, but he still thought like the soldier he had always been. When the commanders finally finished their analysis, Vance spoke. "Give me 300 of my people and 18 months. You won't need your war." The room fell silent. Admiral Karth, the Craxian military liaison, leaned forward. "General, with respect, the Vraxian military numbers in the millions. They have battleships that could crack planets. What could 300 humans possibly do?" Vance smiled. It was the same cold smile he had worn on that shuttle 5 years ago, watching his team prepare to rescue 400 hostages from 200 terrorists. "The same thing we've always done, Admiral. The impossible." The operation took 14 months. The humans did not fight the Vraxian military directly. They did not need to. Instead, they found other ways. They identified key leaders and removed them quietly in the night. They discovered communication networks and filled them with confusion and lies. They located supply lines and made them disappear without a trace. They did not conquer the Vraxian dominion. They broke it. The empire collapsed from within. One province after another declared independence. Military units turned on each other, following orders that had been subtly altered by unknown parties. The central government fell apart, consumed by paranoia and internal conflict. When it was over, the Confederation sent peacekeeping forces to help stabilize the region. The Vraxian people, freed from their tyrannical leaders, welcomed the assistance gratefully. Nobody officially connected the collapse to human involvement. There were rumors, of course. There were always rumors. But nothing could be proven. Nothing could be traced. 300 humans had dismantled an empire. They returned to Earth without fanfare, without medals, without recognition. They drank beer and told jokes and started preparing for the next mission. Because there was always a next mission. In bars and trading posts across the galaxy, a saying had begun to spread among spacers and soldiers and anyone else who lived on the edges of civilization. Pray you never see them. Because if you see them, they've already decided you won't survive. It was not entirely accurate. The humans showed mercy when they could. They preferred to capture enemies alive when possible. They did not kill for pleasure or sport, but when they decided someone needed to die, that someone died. There were no negotiations, no second chances, no appeals to higher authority. Just silence and shadows and the sudden understanding that you had made a very serious mistake. Ambassador Crixall, now the Valorian representative on the Confederation Council, often thought about that night on the orbital station. He remembered the darkness, the screaming, the impossible speed of the human soldiers as they moved through corridors designed for beings twice their size. He had asked Sergeant Briggs how they did it. Just training, she had said. Just training. Crixall knew better now. He had studied human history for 5 years. He had watched their movies and read their books and tried to understand what made them different from every other species in the known galaxy. It was not just training. It was something deeper, something built into the very core of what humans were. They had never known peace. From the moment their ancestors climbed down from the trees, they had been fighting. Fighting animals, fighting nature, fighting each other. Every generation, every century, every millennium. War without end. And through all that fighting, they had become something the galaxy had never seen before. Not monsters. Monsters were mindless. Humans were terrifyingly intelligent, not demons. Demons were supernatural. Humans were natural, which somehow made them more frightening. They were simply humans. A species forged in the fire of their own endless conflicts, tempered by 10,000 years of violence, shaped into weapons so efficient that the galaxy could barely comprehend them. Crixall looked at the stars outside his office window and felt something that might have been gratitude. The humans were on his side. He intended to keep it that way, on Earth, in a building that still appeared on no official maps. General Danny Vance received a new mission brief on his secure terminal. He read it carefully, nodded to himself, and forwarded it to his team leaders. Tomorrow, they would start planning. Next week, they would start training. Next month, they would deploy. The galaxy had called. The humans had answered. They always answered, because that was what they did. That was what they had always done. That was what they would always do, until the stars themselves burned out. Humanity had never asked to be the galaxy's monsters. They had simply shown everyone what 10,000 years of fighting themselves had created, and the galaxy prayed never to meet them.